Well. Tim Ballard, I presume. It's been an interesting journey here for us here at Hellfire Agency, which is a long running podcast that still is not entirely sure what it wants to be when it grows up. It's kind of functioning on a Lost Boys philosophy. It's like, yeah, I want to grow up. I want to ever be a man. I just want to be a boy and stay in Neverland. And there are some people who think that means that we died, that we died in childhood, which may be a more apt metaphor for modern masculinity than people think. Hello. So good to see you guys here. I'll put the link into the description of the video. I had invited a few people to join us, and they all have said some variation of, I'll try. So they have the link, and I will be putting the link up in the chat here as we go. But I wanted to kind of set up the show today and allow people to kind of see what we're more or less talking about here. So we are the Church of Korihor. We are a spiritual congregation for godless people, and we are trying to assist people who are unsheltered to have at least a more comfortable existence by bringing them blankets and sundry items. Right now, some things that are in pretty desperate need are hot hands or pocket warmers, not other kinds of hot hands, but pocket warmers, and also food. We've been taking out to the streets where we can. So these are things that people can do. You can help us in our godless purpose to serve the unsheltered at korihor.org/give. You can also just go to korihor.org. Just click on the button give. The money and items donated on that page don't go to me. They don't go to the church. They don't go to anybody in our entity organization. They go to the work. So I would encourage all of you, make a $5 donation when you get over there. I have recently been informed that the Amazon link on the page is not working. We haven't quite nailed down why that is, because the Amazon list is still up and working. So we're working on that. Sorry about that. Those of you who are only Amazon givers. That doesn't sound right. Yeah, so we're going to get the show started here. But today we're going to talk about Tim Ballard. If you don't remember Tim Ballard, well, there is not time to catch you up. But Tim Ballard, we used to say was a Mormon grifter, but the Mormon church kicked him out because he was too much of a grifter. Do you know how bad of a grifter you have to be for the Mormons to go, well, I think this guy's lying? And he is bringing us down with him, you know what I'm saying? And then, so he got his ass kicked out of the Mormon church. No shade. I've done it. But as I have said before, hashtag Mormon flunkies are not Exmos. And Tim Ballard, turns out, was accused by several women whose lawsuits have now been dropped, that he had engaged in exploiting them while they were working for him, supposedly in rescuing children from trafficking. And turns out he was the one they accused of being the trafficker and not having saved any children. One of the more curious things, if you remember, about Tim Ballard is that whether it was back in his Operation Underground Railroad days, then he left Operation Underground Railroad right around the same time as the Sound of Freedom fiasco. He's always maintained that he has saved 4,000 children from trafficking, 5,000 children from trafficking, 6,000 people, 7,000 people. Now he's saying as much as 10,000 children that he has saved from trafficking, with absolutely no justification whatsoever. Cool. We have Gene Judson in the house, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be good. I am putting the link here in a minute into the description, because we're going to get some more people in here if you guys want to be part of the story tonight. Because we finally have the answer to how it is that Tim Ballard and the hacks at OUR and his related, Spear Fund, and all this, how they're actually calculating how many children they have rescued from trafficking, and the answer is, well, stupid. It's so stupid. It's shocking. It's like, are you kidding me? Uh, to we gotta get some fun happening here. So what happens is every Friday at corahorde.org, we do a big shindig. We try to have a little bit of fun. We take very serious things and laugh at them, and we do whatever we can to get together and make it feel like this week was definitely worth living to see. By having a little bit of fun at the expense of some charlatan or another. And today it's our old man Tim Ballard. Okay, because it turns out Tim Ballard's chickens may actually come home to roost right here in the good old US of A. I want to congratulate my friend Kara Burrell and Ryan Fisher for having done an excellent expose recently, just a couple days ago, where they played on their show on the Timmy Did What podcast. They showed an interview with Tim Ballard in which he gives the whole game away. He actually shows off that he doesn't really care about the Epstein files, because he knows people on the Epstein files, and he is more convinced than ever that his friend Donald Trump is not just is not protecting criminals. We're going to try to use as safe language as we can this early on in the broadcast. Is not protecting criminals. He's protecting everybody else, all the good people, like Tim Ballard's good friend Alan Dershowitz. And I went, blah, 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 blah. Woof, wow. I've been following the Tim Ballard fiasco for a while, and I'm like, Tim Ballard knows Alan Dershowitz? You mean the Alan Dershowitz who Virginia Giuffre said she was sold to for when she was just a wee lass, and she was just just a young one, just a little one. And it's like that Alan Dershowitz, who's out there having to defend himself all over the place, the myriad number of times that he was in contact with Jeffrey Epstein, who not one, once upon a time, supposedly because he was Jeffrey Epstein's attorney, which he was. But then they continue to stay in touch after that. But Tim Ballard says that he was convinced that the Epstein files, which 3 million, so far that we know, at least 3 million documents have not been released. In addition to the 3 million plus that have been released, there are 3 million that were determined not related. And he says that he knows that Donald Trump, who is a good man, has the wisdom of God, in doing so, because as Donald Trump says, he can't have all of that released. It would ruin too many good people's reputations. And it's like, there you have it, friends. Here's your sound of freedom. Here is your OUR man. Here is your Mormon defender of the faith saying basically, no, Epstein Islanders aren't so bad. Oh man, I really need to get moderators. Do I need moderators? Yeah. So they have. So there. So in any event, but here's the events. I have been trying for a while to find the connections between Epstein and Tim Ballard. I posted a little while ago on Twitter and TikTok, etc., with this question and said, "Who's in the Ballard files? Never mind who's in the Epstein files. Yes, I want to know too, but who's on the Ballard list? How does this all come back to Tim Ballard? Because if it doesn't, it doesn't. But I'm gonna go ahead and guess that somebody as close to Donald Trump as Tim Ballard was and is. I'm going to say somebody so close to the Mormon leadership, like President M. Russell Ballard, as he is. There's a meeting somewhere. There are people who showed up to an island somewhere, or to the desert, or to the desert abode, or the Florida beach house, or the New York brownstone. And I'm telling you, there's a connection here somewhere. I feel it in my bones. I don't know it to be true. I just know it's true. So, and then turns out Alan Dershowitz may actually be the kickoff point, because right now Tim Ballard has been off in Israel, trying to make a case for the protection of the Druze, not Jews. I mean, trying to protect Jews as well. Certainly, let there be all the safety in the world for our Jewish friends. But it's curious how close he got. So for a man whose work was in Syria, suddenly his work, since he has been, you know, since his fall from grace, has all become about Israel lately. And Alan Dershowitz is a hawk for defending Israel. No crime. Not saying there's any crime there. But it does make sense that there is a connection here. Somehow these men know each other, have met, have worked together somewhere, and it's just a matter of time. I have some leads that have gone cold on that, and I have a couple more that look promising. We'll see how that goes. But while I've been working on this, there have been some interesting little tidbits like this one. In the state of Washington, there are many people who have gone to prison because of a program, a kind of program that was originally called Operation Underground Railroad, that became known as Net Nanny. And so, oh, did we lose everybody? Well, I hope not. Are we still live? Somebody out there in the live worlds. Did we go down? Just want to make sure. Gee, it looks like I'm live on your channel. Looks like I'm still live from my end. So, okay, just want to make sure. Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you. In any event, we're going to get going here. This is, again, Giving Friday, and we are going to... I can take all this stuff off here. We don't need that. And we're going to talk about Tim Ballard and this breaking story, breaking in the last few days anyways. And it's going to be a wild ride, you guys. So thanks for coming out. And remember, if we're going to fight against charlatans like Tim Ballard, we're going to need more money than God.
Gather round, storm these pews at the sound, spoil God's coffers for Korah, steal these tithes to feed the poor. Poor church mice and their offering plates will wake to our hoods in their face, rob St. Peter down to the floor. Make God stand for something more. We'll fleece Mammon's coffers, their starving flock to feed. Send them back to Jesus without their means. So Judas steeples into unholy sod, finally have more money than God. Folks they don't, but godly men give With their 30 pieces of silver, we'll escape their hell. If they try to stop us, we'll ring their bell. If they get up the Danites on their graves, we'll trod. Finally have more money than God.
I say, all right, all right, all right, all right. Let's bring my good friend Gene Judson. He is here in the studio with me. We're going to get going because we're going to talk to catch a predator. I know that's not where you thought this was going. We're going to talk to catch a predator to get kicked off here. But I'd hate to leave my man Gene Judson down in the comments only. We got him here in the studio. Let's take advantage of it. Let's go. And Gene,
Good evening.
how are you?
I'm doing relatively okay. I've had some dental surgery this week.
Oh no. Were you well? And I lost you already.
Somehow you dropped me out.
I didn't mean to. Hold on. I can hear you now at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
there you
Go on. Dental surgery, really? Sorry.
Yeah.
Gene.
So Halloween has been my favorite holiday. It's pretty much every day of the year, and I have slowly been dropping out teeth, and and I've had a lot of infection, and so I did the whole ball of wax. They call it all on four, so that I have posts, and I've got permanent dentures. So it costs a
Okay.
pretty penny, but right now everything hurts. All my teeth, I had 17 left. They were removed on Wednesday, and on Thursday I had this put on. And this is a trial. We're going to see how things are. There's stronger material that they're going to put in 5 or 6 months from now. But
All right.
somehow also it's caused me to have a little bit of a frog in my throat compared to normal.
I'm sorry to hear that. But
Probably because I'm not getting good sleep. That's probably why.
yeah, you gotta don't trade off, man. You can have teeth and sleep. You can do both.
But I wanted to hear what you had to say about Tim Ballard.
Cool. Well, to get to Tim Ballard, we got to talk to Catch a Predator. You remember To Catch a Predator, Tim? Or Gene?
Just a little. I was never involved in any of the shows, as far as I know.
You weren't ever you weren't
I
ever a
was never a
surprise.
subject. Never a
That's a-
subject.
A surprise guest. Come on down. Yeah. So it was an interesting time. To Catch a Predator was kind of my guilty pleasure for a long time. You know how To Catch a Predator was like it was the most popular TV show. It started out, of course, as a segment on Dateline NBC, kicked off the career, the somewhat floundering career of a news anchorman that wasn't really going anywhere, Chris Hansen, and got his lucky break into like a whole wild ride. Became the most popular show on TV in spite of the intense legal challenges actually surrounding the show. So I think you remember what the show was about there, Gene?
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. So basically it was candid camera, but legal style for people who like to go and chat with people they assumed were minors and were really police officers. And that seems like it's the best. It's the cacophony of all of the things that people love about live TV, or not live TV, but about reality TV. Reality TV.
Shock value.
That's right. It's candid. It was startlingly human, unrehearsed for the most part, and then it was humiliating, and it was just kind of a guilty pleasure. It was like being a fly on the wall on somebody getting busted for just about the most despicable behavior that everybody assumes is happening on some level, right? I mean, you think to yourself, well, yeah, surely we all know that there is trafficking happening at some level, and somebody out there is talking to children in this way or to young people this way. And that this is, somebody's doing it. You hear it happen, you hear about it all the time. So somebody's actually out there doing it. And it was like getting a peek into being a fly on the wall on everything from somebody out there who was just like obviously experimenting with this and getting excited by an opportunity to do something, all the way down to some of the most terrifying moments in television. Like there are moments where the decoy, who was always an adult person working through an organization, either one of them was an organization called Perverted Justice, and then another one was called Tetrid Core, and it was always an adult person, sometimes an actor, who could be dressed down to look younger. And there's even one episode where a guy who had been caught on To Catch a Predator one time, and then he was released when on parole or something, and then he got caught a second time. And they bring up the show. They bring up in the show a phone call he has with the decoy, and he explains to the decoy what a decoy is, and it's like one of the it's like reality folding in on itself. It's one of the more funny episodes. Anyways, but he actually explains to this person, he's like, yeah, have you seen I just want to make sure that, he's like, I want to make sure you're not like a cop or anything, right? And she's like, no, why? How could I be a cop? I'm just a girl. And he's like, good. I don't know if you've ever heard of To Catch a Predator. And she's like, oh, I don't know. It's like the most popular TV show in prime time at the time. No, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's where they get this girl. She's really like in her 20s, but they get her she's not even 14. He says it like the most disgusting way. And he's like, and it turns out she's just pretending. She's like, oh no. And he's like, yeah. And then you come out and there are cops waiting for you. And he's explained to the decoy what a decoy is. And that was my guilty pleasure for a long time. I'm like, it's like, oh, you get this peek at how stupid, perverse, and gross humanity is. And then you get to walk away and say, I'm such a good person, as I don't do things like that. So these taxes can wait until April 16th. So in any event, not that I do that, Uncle Sam, Uncle Donnie. Anyways, so, but that more or less, they got hundreds of people who were put away on the show, who wound up going to prison. By and in large, most of those people never went to trial. They would come out of the sting operation. They would get arrested. And in the course of being arrested, they would usually confess to some level of the crime without asking for an attorney, which is always, you always have a right to an attorney. I am not one. I can't give you legal advice, but if I were in your situation, whatever that situation is, if I have a right to an attorney, I'm getting one. I'm not talking until I talk to an attorney. And, but these people would just waive their rights to an attorney, generally speaking. It's dumb. That's not smart. And then they would just start confessing to these officers. And then by the time they actually have an attorney, if they ever have an attorney, that attorney is like, you told this all to the police, huh? And after they had all that information on you, you then just told them everything they wanted to hear. Okay, well, here's what you're going to do. You're either going to take a plea deal, or you're going to plead guilty, or if you're going, or you're going to hope that they just drop the charges. And in almost every case, they wind up just taking a plea deal. And just take whatever they get, negotiate the best possible deal you can. They wind up going to prison and ending up on the sex offender registry. And it's like and so for the most part, it's generally probably a very good thing that it ends up that way, because a lot of these people end up being, whoops, John, Gene, I think we've kind of half lost you there. We'll let Gene rejoin us here. Okay, there he is. So that kept going until one of the more interesting ones was this guy, Joseph Roisman. Some of you may remember him. Oh, hold on. I clicked the button. You're not ready for that. So this guy, if you can see him here, sorry, those of you who are in the portrait view, it's kind of awkward. They're still figuring out how to distribute the slides on the portrait view. It's not worked out entirely. Um, this guy over here on the left, who has no shirt on, is Joseph Roisman. He was a young man in the Navy who had traveled 5 hours because he didn't have, I believe he was in San Diego. He traveled 5 hours to Petaluma, California. I don't believe it takes that long if you have a car, but he had to go and take a bus and make it up there to Petaluma without his own car, so he could see a girl who I believe he thought was 13 years old. And he arrives there. She's got a hot tub ready for him. Tells him to go ahead and help himself to a frozen drink. She goes and slips into a swimsuit. He's like, "Oh, I that's great, but I didn't bring a swimsuit." She's like, "You're not going to need one." He's like, "Right on." So he starts stripping down, and he's game, right? But then he notices that he's got this boot camp body. He's stripping down for nobody because she's gone inside the house, and he gets a little twinkle in his eye and says, "Hot tub, I'm following her into the house." So he follows her into the house, and lo and behold, Chris Hansen comes out. Go ahead and have a seat right there for me. Remember that. That was the iconic line. Those of you who are too young to know To Catch a Predator, that's the iconic line. Why don't you go ahead and have a seat right there for me? And you remember, Gene, how he would do whenever he would catch one of these guys, right? And they would always hem and haw and answer very much the same way, right? Sounds about right. But it was always you'd sit there and you'd listen to them, and it'd always be like, "Oh, tell him that you were concerned for her safety." "Oh, what do you do? What are you doing here?" I was worried that she was home alone. And it's like, 13-year-old girl, you were worried that she was home alone? Why? What might happen? Oh, some creep might drive 5 hours to, let's see, do what now? So he would let them he would feed them rope to themselves with for a bit, to Epstein themselves a little bit there. And then he'd pull out the chat. And it was all for the show. It was all for production. And but of course he's using the real chat that these guys have had with an adult person who presumably they think is a child, and the dirty things they say to this person when they're chatting with them from the safety of behind their keyboards. So Joseph Roisman ends up, there you go. So Joseph Roisman, he is in the Navy. He is used to taking orders. Basically, from the moment that Chris Hansen starts putting on his air of authority, he's an older man and obviously a man of some position and authority. He starts telling this young sailor, and he starts saying, "Listen, you're here because you knew this girl's 13 years old." And he's like, "Yes, I did know that." And he starts telling him, he's like, "You wanted to do all of these things with her." And he's like, "I wouldn't have actually done that with her." And he's like, "You and I," and he starts basically instructing him on, that we both know that you would. And he's like, "That's what you're here for." And he's like, "You're going to go ahead and leave now, but you need to know I'm Chris Hansen. This is Dateline NBC. You can go ahead and go." And the guy puts his shirt on, goes back out through the garage. The police arrest him. Now, in the moment that you're going to see here, because we don't do playing clips anymore ever since our good dear brothers at dear Big Brother over at Google started shutting down our lives whenever I would show clips of anything. So we don't do that anymore. Suffice it to say, over here in this image that you're looking at, this slide, in the right-hand corner, there's this shot of a trailer that the police have set up outside. And this officer that this young man is talking to spends a long time. I think they actually say in the show that they spent like a couple hours there, where he started feeding him over and over and over and again. He's like, "You came out here to what?" And he's got to get a statement on camera from this guy. He's got to get an official statement from this young man saying that he's out here to commit a crime. And it ends up the best he can get out of him. The young man tells him, "Yes." He's like, "Did you bring items X, Y, and Z, obviously for sexual purposes, with you?" "Yes." Was it in case there was sex?" "Yes." Is it, he gives him everything that he needs except the actual statement that says, "I was going to do this. I was going to do this with this young person." He ends up with convincing him to say, if you'd had the opportunity if this were an actual 13-year-old who was here, again, there's no 13-year-old there. And he's like, "If you had had an opportunity, you're telling me you wouldn't have wanted to?" And he says, "Well, I suppose I guess in that situation, I would have wanted to." Book him, Dano. But, actually sends him away to court. Now that is where things get hairy. Okay. Now, granted, nobody should do what this young man did in this situation. Okay. But it's important to remember a little word, fairly multi-syllabic word, Gene, which is entrapment. Entrapment is this legal principle that varies from state to state that says the police cannot charge you with a crime effectively that they convinced you to commit. And that's entrapment. You can't, if they goaded you into it, you can plead entrapment. You can plead, "I was entrapped by law enforcement." Now, why don't we hear this word more often? Frankly, because a lot of people don't realize that they can do it. Secondly, this is one of the main reasons why police departments don't do stings like this, is because once people have figured out and that they get a lawyer, and a lawyer gets in there and says, "Let's find all the ways in which this sting operation is entrapment," and then they can plead entrapment, and they can either convince them to drop the charges, convince the court to throw out the case, or they can take it all the way to a jury trial and then convince a jury, look what they did. This isn't about, yes, my client is awful, he's pernicious, he's terrible, he's done this awful thing, but no actual children were harmed. There was no child from the beginning. The state can't prove that my client actually believed that there was a child, and nobody can prove what my client would have done had there actually been a child there. So this whole thing is really about the police just picking up on a vulnerable young man on a moment where he made a flighty decision, and where he must have figured that he would go there and see what would happen. And then, for all any of us knows, he would have called that girl's parents and said, "You need to make sure this child's not left home by themselves anymore," and then gone home, because you can't prove otherwise. And so,
It's like Pre-Crime,
right,
Tom Cruise movie,
right, Minority Report.
Minority Report.
Yeah, but they called it the pre-crime division. That's exactly the point, right? It's like how you establish the mens rea, right? The predator mind, the guilty
Intent.
mind, right? That intent, and it's like, when does that translate from the intent to commit a crime to the actual commission of a crime? In this case, they're exploiting laws there that say, if you travel some distance to arrive someplace, and especially if you arrive at that place with something, let's say, like condoms or lubricant or food or alcohol or drugs,
Ropes and tape.
right? Okay, exactly. We apparently we could go a while if Jesus gave us ideas.
I watched Dexter.
Well, and that's wild because you say Dexter. I mentioned earlier, there was one episode that got scary. There was a gal who I believe it was in the Connecticut stings, who this young woman, I want to say it was the Nervous Nelly girl. She was like one of the most endearing characters, one of the most endearing people that got to do this, because she would always play like nervous, like, oh, I don't know, I've never done anything like this before. And she would like, like always be touching her hair or her hoodie or whatever. And she played the part really well. And then she went to the door and she's like, and this guy's there and he's like, hey, let's go for a ride. And she's like, no, I thought we'd come inside and just stay here for a while. And you remember that? And he's like, don't you want to go for a ride in the car? I think you want to go. We'll go get some food. I'll show you the town. We'll go. And she's like, I don't feel comfortable with that. And they actually had to send Chris Hansen across the house to get her. And it's like, hey, how's it going? And then the guy tries to run. Well, it turns out that guy had like duct tape and weapons in his car. And like he it was freaky. Like you watch the footage and it gives you it gives you the creeper vibe. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that young woman, they kept doing sting after sting after sting with her. And she's just like, she just had to shake that off and just keep going. So in any event, entrapment in the state of California. Let me go ahead and read that for you. Not terribly easy to read in this little tiny screen. But we'll give it a try. How about that? Entrapment is a defense. The defendant has the burden of proving this defense by a preponderance of the evidence. This is a different standard from proof beyond a reasonable doubt. To meet this burden, the defendant must prove that it is more likely than not that he or she was entrapped. A person is entrapped if a law enforcement officer or his/her agent engaged in conduct that would cause a normally law-abiding person to commit the crime. So basically at that point, that's a pretty thorough explanation, a very detailed explanation of how entrapment is. Of course, it goes on from there to set up the legal precedent. I'm not an attorney. I can't tell you what is or isn't. But what I can tell you is that historically what happened with Joseph Roisman was that as they were just about to go to trial, actually he and his representation decided, we're going to go to trial. We're going to convince a jury that this was entrapment. And he actually is getting to the process of getting to the point where they're going to get a jury in there to try and they're going to convince this jury, have an opportunity to convince this jury that to catch a predator isn't actually catching predators. It's just taking normal people in vulnerable situations, at least in this case, and it's setting them up for a crime they wouldn't actually commit. The police are making them commit it. This is police, this is cruelty on behalf of the police. And the judge decides at the last minute to throw the case, to acquit. They decide to acquit the Joseph Roisman, saying that the state didn't have enough evidence. Now, again, they have all those hours, they have all those chats, all of this information, and all these things he told to the decoy, all these things he said to Chris Hansen and before the entire world on television. They said, and they have all of his basically saying all of these things to the police, saying he came here to do this with a girl. Yes, knowing thinking she was a child. But because they never had a moment where she was just being a child or presumed to be a child, and he crossed the line with, hey, let's do this thing. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that to you, while he has an opportunity to actually do it. And because they didn't have that, he was acquitted. Now, his story, and in case you are feeling complicated about Joseph Roisman, the follow-up on this is, if you feel bad for him that he got himself into the situation, had to go to court, don't, because he did some pretty creepy stuff with a girl he apparently did think was a child. And if you feel badly that, no, I feel bad that he got off, that he didn't end up going to prison, you can rest assured he did go to prison. He just didn't go to prison for this. He went to prison for I think grand theft auto and possession of materials. Possession of not contraband. What's the word? Anyways, possession of druggy stuff. And and then he just went on committing more and more crimes and getting caught, and his life is actually his life just descended into chaos and sadness and crime, anyways. Even though he got away with this one, which again, is it a crime? There, these crimes are meant to protect children, and there were no children present. There were no children involved. What does that have to do with Tim Ballard? So glad you asked. This right here, let me see if I can move things around so it's clear to everybody. Okay. Wow, this is even harder now to read. Let me see if I can get in really close here. Okay. So this, as you're looking at, is the code as it is for entrapment, as it is listed in the state of Washington. Back in 2014, Operation Underground Railroad partnered with a guy named Carlos Rodriguez. Carlos Rodriguez was a high-up mucky-muck detective inside the Washington State Patrol. And he was running an operation that was kind of a net nanny, based roughly on a similar style, whether or not it was actually directly based on To Catch a Predator. It was basically To Catch a Predator, just without Chris Hansen and without the TV cameras. He was basically setting this up, a sting operation, otherwise almost exactly like To Catch a Predator in Washington State. Now, he is law enforcement at that time with Washington State. Things get, when he runs out of money. He doesn't have enough money to keep the operation going, so he goes to the private sector. Can't get any more money out of the state, so he goes to private foundations, and somebody happens to mention to him, the Mormons down there in Utah, they've got their own little anti-trafficking organization, and they have a meeting with a bunch of rich Mormons down there, Glenn Beck's rich Mormon kids, and they go out and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening in the world. How much money do you need? Now come the checkbooks. So he contacts Operation Underground Railroad, and they're like, oh, this is so great that you're doing this. Our boy Tim Ballard, the founder of our organization, he did that for the Department of Homeland Security. Lies. And before he left there and went to found this organization where we're finding, I don't know that they actually told him this, but at the time, 2014, that's when they were allegedly finding Gardy Marty in Haiti. News, spoiler alert, those of you who haven't been following, about the little Mormon Haitian boy who was kidnapped out during church from out in front of his father's church house at, down in Haiti. But that boy,
father was a bishop too, right?
His father was the bishop of the congregation, and he is the owner of was the owner at the time of the orphanage that was working with Janet Russin, at the psychic who later becomes relevant in the story. If you know the Tim Ballard story, you know about Janet Russin from Provo. He also had lived in Utah for several years, where the father had lived and his family had lived in Utah for several years, where Gardy was born. Gardy was an American citizen because of the 14th Amendment. He had birthright citizenship, like you and me, I think. Well, at least me, anyways. And Gardy's an American, so the FBI sends a couple people down to Haiti, special agents, saying, apparently there's an American boy we got to find. Has been kidnapped out here. They can't find him. I mean, 48, 72 hours, and in Haiti or the Dominican Republic. I mean, it's good luck. Good luck to find this boy. Turns out, may or may not be that a former employee. The way it appears, nobody knows for sure what happened to Gardy, but it appears that one of his father, Gesno Marty's former employees and or rivals, actually kidnapped him and held him ransom, and then the ransom didn't get paid. For whatever reason, the ransom generally didn't get paid. And that boy, he'd be a grown man now. He'd be very much a grown man now. If he's not out there working in trafficking right now, it's probably because little Gardy is no longer with us, sadly. But in any event, so while they're doing that, while they are not saving Gardy Marty, They decide they need a win. All of a sudden, the state of Washington's police department, the Washington State Patrol, contacts them and they need money. They cut them a check. They not only cut them a check, but presumably they start saying, hey, do you need assets? Do you need help with actually carrying out stings like this? Because we got this guy, he's an expert, the Sound of Freedom guy, what will become the Sound of Freedom guy. We'll make sure that you guys get trained on all this. And this is where things get wild, get a little bit hairy in Washington. So remember, we were just looking at California because Joseph Roizman was in Petaluma, California, or arrived in Petaluma, California when he was arrested. We just looked at California's entrapment code. Here is entrapment as it is in Washington state. So it reads, entrapment, 1, in any prosecution for a crime, it is a defense that, 2, or A, I really got to get this. Hold on. Let me load this up here. I figured out how to do this before. Here we go. Oh, much better. In any okay. 1A, the criminal design originated in the mind of law enforcement officials. Again, in any prosecution for a crime, it is a defense that the criminal design originated in the mind of law enforcement officials or any person acting under their direction, i.e., even if it's perverted justice or whatever, some volunteer or Operation Underground Railroad. If they're working with law enforcement and that person, if the idea for the criminal design, if the criminal design originated in the mind of law enforcement and the actor was lured or induced to commit a crime which the actor had not otherwise intended to commit, and 2, the defense of entrapment is not established by a showing only that law enforcement officials merely afforded the actor an opportunity to commit the crime. A little roundabout way of saying, while maintaining that just setting up a sting isn't entrapment. It's not that there was an opportunity to commit a crime that means entrapment. It means how they carried it out shows very clearly that that person had no intention of committing a crime until the idea was transplanted from a law enforcement officer or somebody working on behalf of law enforcement from the law enforcement side to the person of interest side, the subject side, and so the actor. So that's how it looks from the side of the state of Washington. Now, remember, just like with To Catch a Predator, chances are if somebody shows up and as a result of a sting operation in court, they show up to answer for these charges, chances are very, very high it never goes to trial. They get up there, they've been caught, whatever materials that have been produced in getting that person to this point, they're confronted with it. And chances are, if they don't have an attorney, if they say that a man who represents himself has a fool for a client, chances are the police by that point, the police and or prosecution have convinced them you just want to take a plea deal. And if they don't have an attorney, chances are good their attorney is going to come out and say, trust me, you want a plea deal. And and chances are good that they're going to take a plea. But if it did go to trial, that is the point where it doesn't, especially if you have a public defender attorney, they don't get paid more to go to a lengthy trial and make sure that you get your best chance at just having the charges dropped. So they're going to try and get you in and out that door as fast as possible, hopefully get you the best deal as they can, though there's no guarantee that they're going to do that. If this is an attorney provided to you by the court, as in many of these cases, that's the best you can hope for. But there are some people who have money and who have attorneys, and there is a possibility in some dozens or hundreds of cases of people who fall in these stings and end up with charges against them, that at least one of them is going to be an accountant, a doctor. We saw it with To Catch a Predator. They caught a rabbi once. They caught, a lot of them were guys down on the base in San Diego, or it was soldiers or what have you, or immigrants, and so forth. And but then occasionally you'd end up with somebody who has an attorney, and where there's an attorney who's paid to actually make sure that you don't end up going to prison if you don't have to, chances are good they're going to try and say, no, let's go to trial. I want my chance with an attorney, with a jury, to say my client is innocent. So, and that's the
Right.
situation.
Innocent, but for the sting operation.
That's right. Yeah. That if you're shocked that this is a crime, don't come complaining to us. Talk to the Washington State Patrol. This is their crime, not ours. And remember, these laws are meant to protect children. There are no children. This is a situation where there are no children. I want to share with you a screen here. So this is an article written by published with in an organization called The Appeal. This is a news network, a kind of contrarian news publication website that advocates for people who are somewhat marginalized on the outside of on the fringe and the edge of the system here. It's a service provided by Truth Out, which is one of these alternate news sites that actually covers real news, but it covers news that the mainstream media doesn't cover because it's not juicy enough. But usually they try and get to the bottom of cases and stories where it shows the injustice of the system that we're living in. This is an article that came out back in December. It says Tim Ballard's reputation is in shambles. The Americans he helped arrest want answers. And this is where things are getting interesting here. Okay, so I mentioned that it was 2014. There was a guy named Carlos Rodriguez who worked for Washington State Patrol. He contacts Operation Underground Railroad, gets hooked up with Tim Ballard, gets himself a check. I think at the start they ended up with just like $20,000, and but then they start working operations together. Next thing you know, by 2020, over the course of the next 6 years, he's doing more and more and more and more with Operation Underground Railroad. By 2020, he retires from Washington State Patrol, and guess what? He's already got himself a new job. He works for Operation Underground Railroad at that point. And so he ends up working for Tim Ballard's firm, doing these sting operations. And all of these people that they had put away, all these people end up in the system, and most of them without an opportunity to really claim that they were entrapped, because either they never went to trial, or they never got a day in front of a jury, or they never got a chance to waive their right to a jury and go all the way to a trial and try for an acquittal, or because when they actually went to trial, and there was a jury, there was instructions given to the jury, but for whatever reason, the courts there in Washington would not allow the instructions to be given to the jury to understand what entrapment meant. And that's where things get kind of weird, sketchy. It's almost like the courts know that if the jury learns how that definition I just showed you of what entrapment is under Washington state law, it's almost impossible for a sting operation like this to prove that anybody actually committed a crime, because it's so rare that a person, while they are involved in one of these sting operations, is going to step up and say, "Oh yeah, I'm all about it, man. I'm all about committing massive crimes. I understand that you are a child. This is a dangerous situation. I am a pervert. Let's get this going." And it's almost impossible to expect that that's just going to fall out like that. So usually, in order for them to actually show that this is worth the money that the state is investing in this program, whoever the decoy is, whoever's actually interacting with them, has to kind of put the idea out there And this is all on the record, so it's like, and it's like they get to show, like, these are all the instances in which your officer or somebody working for the law induced my client into doing something he didn't want to do. And this is in the long run, since they started this net nanny operation, this is over 100 people that they have put away. And in most of these cases, their lives have been destroyed. There's even one claim I haven't been able to validate other than in this source. And I have been looking for it. But this guy who wrote this article, by the way, is an interesting character himself. Kevin Light Roth is the author of the article. What's interesting about him is that he is himself not only an independent journalist, so to speak, he's also incarcerated. He's actually in prison, and most of his stories are about life in prison, and the unfairness and the injustice from the inside of the incarcerated system. And so he is, and so he's collecting what information he can. He's got nothing else to do all day, apparently. Apart from the regulars. And he's tracking down this system, and he's tracked down all these people, several people in the system who have been found guilty of these crimes. And he claims that he has discovered that at least 9 people who, even though they did their time, they did what the courts told them to do, because their whole life has been so stigmatized by this operation, that was what was originally Operation Underground Railroad, then became Net Nanny at some point early on. Their lives have become so stigmatized that they have taken their own lives, that they have chosen not to remain with us. That is how badly this destroyed these people's lives. Now, I grant you, I'm not going to pull a Tim Ballard here and tell you, oh, not everybody in the Epstein files is so bad. No. We're going to get into this for a moment here in one of these cases where we're going to show, I'm going to tell you plainly, everything that is the most despicable thing you saw on To Catch a Predator happened in these cases. It's alarming. It's disgusting. And you will wag your head. Oh, I hope if you are conscious beings, and especially if you are parents, that you will wag your head and say, oh my gosh, these people are out there in the world with where my children are, where my children live, right? And it's shocking, right? Should we put the link back into let me put the link out there in case people want to join us. But in case everybody wants to join in the studio here. So it's a curious situation with all of these people, because so many of them never got an opportunity to prove before a jury or to prove before a court that they were entrapped. And that's pretty wild, because when you get down to the brass tacks, if they got their day in court, if even one of them got a day in court where they got to prove, where they got to appeal whether or not they were entrapped by police, this whole thing could come crashing down. Like this whole operation set up by allegedly by Tim Ballard and Carlos Rodriguez, who eventually went to work for Ballard's organization, that this whole thing may come crashing down because they don't know how to run sting operations without entrapping ordinary people into criminal activity. So I'm going to keep this up where I can read it, but I want to go ahead and take this down and show you one such case. So let's see here. Stop screen. And I want to share with you this document. I want to give you a trigger warning. The thing you're about to see is an actual court case. In one such case of somebody, of one of the hundreds, I think it's over 100 people who were arrested in these sting operations in Washington. It's a story of a young man that is quite sad. And the young man's name, their screen, is Ezra Wright. Okay, let me see here. Okay, so this is going to get gross, right? We've all established this. If you can't handle dealing with adult matters and frankly criminal behavior involving crime against children, you may want to join us later and in a future date of the episode of Hellfire Agency. I'm going to censor this as much as I can so that people at least get the idea of it and why this got so hairy and why it is definitely proof once and for all that Tim Ballard has been a grifter low at least these 12 years since he started doing these operations. Okay. These are the guys who are working with OUR. All right. So Ezra Wright appeals to his conviction for attempted assault of a child after he was arrested in a sting operation conducted by the Missing and Exploited Children Task Force. Boom, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, it says here, Wright, a 20-year-old soldier stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord, responded to the ad. And this is an ad on Craigslist that the title listed "Family Playtime?" or exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point, question mark, W4M, woman for man. The ad stated mommy/daughter, daddy/daughter, daddy/son, mommy/son. You get the drift. If you know what I'm talking about, hit me up. We'll chat more about what I have to offer you. And he actually responded to that ad. Now, first of all, Gene, how do you feel about that? About this young man responding to this ad?
Responding to what he thought was an adult at the time.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. Because remember, this is Craigslist. On Craigslist, you can't post if you're not an adult. So, so he's, I mean, he at least has a leg to stand on legally to say it's an adult website. It's not like I went to a website looking for that. I was looking at I was looking for a date. And I saw this ad. I clicked on it. If Craigslist can publish it, I can click open and say, what is this about? Right. For all he knows. Right. I mean, obviously, gross. To each their own. This is, somebody has a kink about this. That's one thing. If there are actual children involved, which, and I can't stress this enough, there aren't. The children are imaginary. It's Tim Ballard's favorite kind of victim. The ones that aren't, they're made up in somebody's head. They aren't there. But something about that headline drew this young man, this 20-year-old soldier, to go, oh, I want to see what this is about. And it gets gross. I won't read you everything, but you'll get a little bit of it. So Krista Kleinfelder, a member of MECTF posing as quote unquote Hannah Jacobs, responded. She wrote, I'm not interested in RP, role play, only someone serious. I'm a single mother of 3 young kids, 13, 11, and 6, and looking for someone to teach my kids this is taboo and not for everyone. She included a phone number that Wright could text her at if he was quote unquote serious. So now they're taking that conversation from, Craigslist platform where a complaint can be issued to, hey, let's take this offline, text message direct one phone to one phone, where of course now it's all now going to be part of this criminal record. So they start engaging back and forth. Basically, I won't give you all of the details of what happens here, but there are multiple times in this conversation, this very gross conversation they have, where Ezra Wright asks her questions like, what do you want me to do with them? Notice the language very particular. What do you want me to do with them? And then he asks her, can you send a picture of them? Gross. And then there was she sends him a picture of her with a couple other officers posing as these kids who are supposedly 13, 11, and 6. Is that right? And she puts a Snapchat puppy filter over their face because obviously they're police officers. They don't look like children. They've done their best, but there's only so much they could do. So she puts a filter over their face as if she's trying to protect their identities. He responds that the girl is cute. Do you want to meet up sometime? Now, and Kleinfelder says that she expressed doubts that he was quote unquote for real. And they had the following exchange. Right. I'm real. Right. I'm military. I'm not supposed to be in this. Now, once again, you remember that what we were looking at entrapment earlier. If you can prove that this is a thing that under normal conditions this person wouldn't have done, the defendant wouldn't have done, then that's entrapment. Kleinfelder says, not sure what that means. And she says, I have rules. The first one is honesty, and the next is directness, which is the wildest thing. For a person who has made up 3 children don't exist and used 3 police officers, a photo of 3 police officers plus her to fake the existence of these children. She says, I don't feel I'm getting either from you. I'm trying to filter out the fakes, and I think why. Spelling incorrect. Right? Respondent says, this is illegal in a lot of ways. We can meet if that makes you feel better. So, I mean, again, these are all these instances where an attorney might be able to tell a jury and say, do you see right here that this young man doesn't want to do this? He's getting talked into it by the officer. She responds, says, me and my family live a discreet life filled with taboo. I don't think it's wrong, but other do, so I have to be careful. Again, if the criminal design, according to Washington State, originates in the mind of the police officer, of the law enforcement officer, or somebody working under direction of the law of the law enforcement. And he says, I just don't want to get in trouble with the law. Do you want to meet tonight? She says, I understand. Then this is not for you. And then basically she cuts it off before he can get to the question. I just want to make sure you're not. I want to make sure you're not a cop before I agree to this. Okay, so it's apparent that he is willing to commit a crime by this point. But at this point, she's been trying to lure him into doing exactly this. And the fact that he doesn't look like he's serious about showing up. Because again, remember, talking about this isn't technically a crime unless she is a minor, and she's not. And she's not even pretending to be. The crime happens, the provable crime happens when he gets out of his little house or off of the base, gets in his car, drives to said location, gets out, and his feet hit the ground, and especially more if his feet hit the ground and she has managed to convince him, or he has, by his own accord, managed to bring something with him that appears very much like he intends to do some kind of sex act. When he gets there, then all of a sudden, all this conversation becomes relevant. Again, eventually, they keep going back and forth like this, where she starts a conversation or he starts a conversation, and then it ends up with, okay, you're not serious. This isn't really happening. She doesn't want to waste time on him, the officer. She doesn't want to waste any time on him if he doesn't actually get into the car and do it, which is where it starts to feel a little entrappy. It ends up with Kleinfelder answered his questions and said, it's okay if you don't want to come here. You can walk away. I'd understand. So she's giving him the, poop or get off the pot moment. He asked if tomorrow worked for her, and she said, sorry, I'm done with these games. Wright then agreed to come to her home that night. Around 10 p.m. on September 9th, Wright arrived at the address that Kleinfelder had told him. After meeting Kleinfelder, he went inside the house and was promptly arrested by officers inside. He had a single condom in his pocket and a box of condoms in his car. He was charged with 1 count of attempted assault of a child in the first degree. At trial, after the state presented the above evidence, the court heard argument about instructing the jury on entrapment. Or in other words, the defense is trying to make the case, whoa. Before this goes any further, let's just make sure that we know exactly how well the jury is going to understand when we say that's entrapment, or when we suggest anything like the entrapment, that's going to be clear to them that we're talking about entrapment and what that means. And Wright contended that the fact that Kleinfelder was the one who brought up having sex with the girls, that Wright took several hours to do so, and that at one point Kleinfelder was the one to reinitiate texting after a 30-minute break in the conversation, all pointed toward entrapment. The court determined that there was inadequate evidence to support the entrapment instruction and did not provide it to the jury. The jury found Wright guilty. Wright appeals. And then it goes into all the legalese and all of the case law that is relevant to why it is that this was not proper and why this is not being done correct. I won't bore you with all that, but you can see what's happening here. So this is where we are. So after
he was sentenced to a 4-year term, but then they appealed, but he's still supposedly on the list until 2031 or something.
Which is where things, like I'm not going to preach against, the offender registry, but I think we all know that it's been a long time. It's long been known this registry destroys people's lives. It's created to do that so that people who are guilty of crimes like these heinous crimes, they never, so they can't recover and fully, and they have to live basically in a different status than the rest of their fellow citizens, right? That as long as it's properly applied, I don't particularly have a problem with it. But the problem is here, this young man didn't do anything to harm an actual child. And so it's like, this is, this could very plausibly be, I'm not an attorney or legal expert of any kind. This is very plausibly entrapment. It's disgusting what he did, I think. But now this article that I was just showing you a minute ago, the boy's father, I believe Dan Wright, says that the undercover operative approached his son with a very fast-paced solicitation, heavily steering the conversation toward an in-person hookup. Convinced that the person he exchanged messages with was a grown woman engaged in elaborate role play. In other words, his son is convinced, she says this isn't role play. That's part of what makes it hot for her. So I'll play along with it, but convinced that there's no way that any human being is going to actually a mother's going to give up her children the way that this person is doing, that he is. And maybe that's what the boy thought. Maybe it isn't what he thought. I'd be a little surprised if a 20-year-old soldier who's got horniness on the brain is thinking that elaborately if he's gone this far in the process. But prove it, right? That's the problem. How do you, just like you were saying, Gene, it's pre-crime. It's like, how do you prove what's in the person's head? And
plus, they've had 300 people sent to jail. 9 have committed suicide. So their lives were ruined enough so that they might have lost family and friends.
And so
and maybe they wouldn't have done anything except for this entrapment.
Yeah. And we're, how many work opportunities have been missed? How many opportunities, to go back to school, get an education have been missed? How many of these people's lives have been destroyed if they had been guilty of a heinous crime, which some of them maybe they had? We don't know all their stories, but it does feel, it feels fishy to me that there's a moment where this young man very clearly has stated in court, whether through his lawyer or by himself. I'd be surprised if he did it for himself. If he did it for himself, wow, amazing, Ezra, right? To say, wait a minute, I want my chance to prove to a jury that this was entrapment, and a judge said, well, you're not going to get it. Sorry. And it's like, wow. And like you're saying, where you got like 300 cases of this that have happened, that of people whose lives have been derailed with this, it does make sense all of a sudden that somebody would say, that a judge would say, let's not set the precedent that you can get out on appeal because you retroactively can say everybody involved in this net nanny, Operation Underground Railroad net nanny, was entrapped, may have been plausibly entrapped. Open up the books, look back at these chats, look back at the evidence, and prove that it wasn't entrapment in all these hundreds of cases. As you can imagine, that's going to be pretty embarrassing. So I'm not saying these judges are doing this for that reason. I'm just saying it feels fishy. It feels suspicious. But what's interesting, so before I get on to this last piece about why this comes home to Tim Ballard even more, is that what's curious about it is supposedly these guys know what they're doing. These sting operations, the sting operations was to catch a predator. That young man, Joseph Roisman, was not the last person to get charges dropped or to get acquitted when it came to catch a predator. And in one case, the case of a sting operation that went bad that actually ended to catch a predator, because again, this was the NBC, this story on Dateline NBC was like the best thing to happen to NBC in years, right? Because they were like, this is so problematic, they can't, and yet getting so much attention that they can't contain it in Dateline anymore. It just doesn't fit as part of Dateline anymore. It needs to be its own program. So they actually broke Chris Hansen off of there and created a whole separate television program for him. And they ran it as long as they could, which was not long. It was like 2 or 3 seasons, I think. And then it abruptly got turned off. They pulled it. And the reason why they pulled it was they went to Texas. They eventually moved around, went to Texas, and it seemed like Texas, the law down there, was where they were going to get away with this the best. The entrapment laws were so much different, or not, or maybe not, plausibly not existent. I don't remember the exact way it was different, but they decided to move the operation to Texas and start running stings down there. And one of the guys they got was a prosecutor. He was like an assistant district attorney. And he was responding. And while he's responding over here to catch a predator, to Chris Hansen and the crew to catch a predator, his coworkers are over here like, that's our man. Wait a minute. What's going on? And somewhere in the back end, he catches wind that, oh crap, you got to be kidding me. I just been caught on To Catch a Predator. He's the predator, and he's prosecutor. They go to confront him, and it's around that time that apparently Chris Hansen and or the producers, as I remember correct, best I remember, got wind of somebody contacts them and says, we're actually kind of worried about this guy because he knows that you're coming. And by the time you get there, he may not be there. So they end up this sting operation to lure him to come to them and commit a crime then becomes a get to him, rescue him from himself before he can do something. And they don't make it in time. Either they don't make it in time, or they're rushing over there and basically trying to beat down the door and get in there and save this man from himself. Pressures him into it. Who knows which it is? Who can even say? But the man took his own life. And that was the end of the show. All of a sudden, nobody wanted to be involved in this. Like, oh, maybe we took this a little bit too far. Maybe, I don't know.
See, if I was him, Mike would have just said, well, I'm doing research for my job.
Who knows, right? But at the same time, it's like the sting operation being run in this guy's district catches him. That story's too good, right? The court of public opinion.
It almost screams that he was Mormon.
Was he Mormon? He might have been. It might have been. But of course, if he were, we probably would have found out and made hay about it by now. We expose. But it's wild to me to think right now. So like in this article, Gene, it's some of the most heartbreaking things. This is the last part about this that I really thought was important here. basically, it tells the story of this guy, Dan, and his son, Ezra, that we just talked about. Then tells the story of a woman named Joanne, who asked that her name be withheld due to threats her family has received in the past. About her son, Brian, who had been swept up in Net Nanny in 2016. Court records showed Joanne's son encountered an undercover Net Nanny officer on an adult dating site. So this is a site for adults. When the officer suggested a sexual rendezvous that included the officer's fictitious children, so probably the same situation, probably the same person, same situation as Ezra, right? But maybe not. Maybe this is what OUR trained them to do. Again, remember, all this is supposedly happening because Tim Ballard and OUR know what they're doing. They're doing this all over the world. They're doing it in Colombia. They're doing it in Haiti. And Tim Ballard supposedly used to do this for the Department of Homeland Security. He should know entrapment, and every person involved in this should understand the difference between entrapment and an actual legit sting, and which is difficult. That's something you need specialized training for. At this point, says Seattle defense attorney Heather Kelly, law enforcement should have moved on. Again, this is the defense attorney defending against these allegations, saying, well, I don't know that she's actually retained by the state on this. I may have misunderstood that. But in any event, she said, he gets this interview from this defense attorney, Heather Kelly, says, at that point, law enforcement should have moved on. Quote, if someone rejects an advance by law enforcement, the investigation should cease. The same is true if the person breaks off communication and there is no independent evidence that the person is involved in illegal activity. Instead of disengaging, the undercover officer contacted Brian again 16 hours later. Brian and the officer sent a few messages back and forth before Brian again stopped replying. The officer waited 18 more hours and then reached out a third time. In the end, the officer's solicitations persuaded Brian. He drove from his parents' home east of Seattle to a residence some 50 miles away, where the woman from the dating site said they should meet. His idea was that if the woman was not interested in a one-on-one encounter, he would leave. He was, of course, driving into a trap and was arrested. Now, this is where it came home in this article that I thought was interesting. That for me, I thought this was very good reporting. Everything that this person has come up with so far, I've been able to validate, except for the self-life taking of these 9 individuals. I haven't found that reported anywhere. Best I can do so far is to assume he must have actually contacted enough of these people to have found at least 9. I don't know. Supposedly, there's an advocacy group somewhere that may have that information.
Also, part of the article says that in February 12, 2016, Captain Mike Edwards of the Seattle Police Department, commander of Washington's chapter of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, a national network of federal and local police agencies, issued a warning to Washington law enforcement officials. He admonished them to by no means participate in OUR-involved operations.
That's right.
Which utilize personnel, equipment, or any other sources. But still, Rodriguez still tried to use OUR employees and stuff like that. So,
right. That's how it all comes back to us. Now, Carlos Rodriguez, interestingly enough, and again, this started 2014, goes at least to 2020 with Carlos Rodriguez before he leaves law enforcement, retires, and goes to work for OUR. And during that time, he claims he personally was involved in the rescue of 31 kids. And he has maintained that the whole time. They maintain, the Washington State Patrol maintains that he was involved in the rescue of 31 children. And as they were talking about in this article, when they were pressed for, how do you calculate this? This has been the problem all along. Tim Ballard claims he's rescued 4, 5, 6, 7,000 kids, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 kids, from all this. And it's like, give us a name, guy. Give us a name of one of them. Because anytime that it comes down to oh, well, you have so and so over here, and you look into it, as Vice News did articles on this, that every time he says, well, there you have this instance over here, this woman I introduced to Ivanka Trump at the White House, it turns out she wasn't rescued by OUR operations. She was trafficked, yes, but she was in the United States being trafficked, and she walked out the front door. She saved herself. And then it's like, well, okay, but we hooked her up with a place to live, and we hooked her up with security and safety, and like, no, this other organization did that. Okay, but we got her. What did you actually do with this woman? And it turns out in the end, he brought her to Donald Trump, to the White House, and it's like that's what you did. You took a woman who was trafficked, who was already being trafficked, and you brought her to the White House to meet Donald Trump, who wasn't available, so he sent Ivanka to meet with the woman instead. And it's like, see, rescuing children all over the world. It's like it's not anything like what you claim, right?
That's right. And Rodriguez saying he rescued 31 children, but all of these stings, it sounds like it was an adult officer saying, "Come and have sex with my children," and there's no children. They don't exist.
They don't exist. It's Tim Ballard's favorite kind of rescue operation. Favorite, what do you call them? Rescuees is imaginary ones. So in the article, maybe I could just read you as he writes it in the article.
The very bottom.
Yep.
Do you want me to read it?
How are you counting this? Oh yeah, go ahead, Gene.
So I asked the question of how you were counting this, said Edwards, who we learned just earlier that he was part of this Washington State program. He explained that Rodriguez had added up the children in each arrest person family and deemed them rescued. It was a bizarre method that did not align with national standards. You can't count those children in official reports, said Edwards. Using the formula recognized by Edwards and others in law enforcement, the actual number of children rescued by Operation Net Nanny is 0.
There you go. This is the loosey-goosey way in which we have saved X number of people or X number of children is being applied. Basically, they need a number that they can put on a slide in a presentation or on a deck or whatever they call it these days. You need a number to put on the website. So what do? You make it up. You say, well, there you add up all the number of kids that live in the house of that person. Obviously, all those kids were going to be victims eventually. And it's like, no, that's not the case. That once again, this is a presumption of guilt, and it's a presumption about the way that the psychology of predators works that doesn't necessarily apply in real life. And in any event, you would have to prove that there were actual real children involved here in each of these cases in order to count these as rescues, and they can't do it. No, the fortunate thing for them is there is, or I'm not going to say there is no law, because there's always laws about fraud, but there's no criminal law that I am aware of, and I'm not an attorney, where if you stand up in front of a bunch of people who have money, whether small amounts or big amounts of money, and say, we've rescued X number of children through this operation, and misrepresent how many it actually is, knowingly misrepresent how much it is. I mean, other than fraud, who's going to, unless somebody with a checkbook takes out that checkbook and writes it instead to an attorney and takes you to litigation, I don't know that there's any punishment coming to you. I mean, you're basically raising awareness on false pretenses, and just making shit up as it goes. If that were easier to track, if it were more illegal, and if there were somebody actually in charge of making sure you can't do that, Tim Ballard probably would have been in trouble a lot longer ago. We have that instance of the big shindig they had here in Utah. I don't know if you remember this because you're not in Utah. but they broadcasted it on TV and stuff, and they had people buy hats, and they did all these, and buy duffel bags with Operation Underground Railroad. They had performances by big time Mormon celebrities and stuff, and it was coming out making emotional appeals, prayerful appeals to God to please help Tim and Operation Underground Railroad save these children, and certainly most of all, biggest deal of all, I think this was like 2016, and most importantly, help us to find and save Gardy Marty, because Gardy Marty is Mormon, the son of a Mormon, who, by the way, as Lynn Packer, who really all of this broke because of the intrepid reporting of Lynn Packer, the nephew of Boyd K. Packer, who used to work for the Mormon Church, doing reporting way back in the Ted Bundy days, the guy who did the coverage for the Ted Bundy trial, and all that. That Lynn Packer, he dug into this, starting back with Ed Smart, who's now back in the news. Now that this new documentary has come out with Elizabeth Smart, I haven't seen yet, can't comment on yet, except that I don't know Ed Smart, but I have met multiple people who know Ed Smart, and I heard this interview that Lynn Packer had with Ed Smart, where he basically, so I had some not privileged information, I have some insider information on how Elizabeth Smart and Ed Smart, back when they started the Elizabeth Smart Foundation together, were so blown away by Tim Ballard and his story. When Glenn Beck started pushing him on all of these wealthy Mormon donors and trying to get, and invested $1 million out of his pocket, out of Glenn Beck's personal pocket, to launch OUR. They were so blown away, impressed, that they joined, while they're running their foundation for actual countering of trafficking, anti-trafficking. They also joined the board of directors at OUR and got paying jobs, at least in the case of Ed Smart, got a paying job at Operation Underground Railroad, being in charge of their aftercare, and then started talking about merging the two organizations together. Second episode I ever did of Underground was an interview with Jesse Stay. You and I talked about this earlier, didn't we? I don't remember what the conclusion was, Gene. Do you know Jesse Stay?
Only that I invited him to be on Latter Daily Digest to talk about a book that he wrote, but he had family business to attend to.
He's a busy guy. And, everybody is their own man. I don't know Jesse other than the many conversations we had. The one conversation we had on, officially recorded, and multiple conversations we have had behind the scenes where he's given me amazing information. A lot of what I know, what I was able to find out in the early days when my TikTok started, I'm going to say something other than blowing up. My TikTok started to grow, and a lot of people were really following these Tim Ballard secret whiteboard meeting videos I was making. And then the podcast, when Hellfire Agency was brand new, a lot of that I got from Jesse Stay, or from people that Jesse Stay connected me to, or materials Jesse Stay connected me to. So I just gave you all. This is a key thing. He's pretty remarkable. Jesse Stay, if you don't know, I'll give you the brief rundown. Jesse Stay is a tech head who was Mormon. He was known as the Mormon programmer or the Mormon search
engine optimizer.
Right. And he is just a nerd. He's a geek, right? And he loves to code, and he loves social media, and he loves all things that are, consulting on how to help brands to build their brand using code. And he got kind of headhunted by the Mormon Church, by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, when, in the days all of us Exmos remember, when, if you looked up anything about the Mormon Church and Mormon scandal, Mormon this, Mormon history, you got some anti-Mormon quote unquote website, right? You'd get, the Ex-Mormon Foundation, or you would get Mormoner, which is technically, I guess, an apologist website. You'd get all of these independent websites. Whereas now when you do that, chances are good the top several hits are going to be some website connected to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, either the actual official church website or some other one. Jesse Stay was brought on as a consultant for the church when the church decided we need to hire somebody who will help us to turn the tables so that when people go on and Google things on the internet, they don't get to the anti-Mormons first. They don't get to the Exmos first. They get to the and to some extent, the church is still involved in that, right? With this whole mediation with John DeLynn and Mormon Stories. But in any event, but so Jesse was that guy. And while he was there, he interfaced with apostles. He actually talked to top leadership at the church. And one of the things they were concerned about, he told me in this interview, we did a 2-hour interview at the beginning. He said their main concern was Mike Norton, also known as New Name Noah. I don't know, and you know who this is. I'm talking about, Gene. We don't say his name 3 times because has a tendency to emerge. And frankly, while I one time counted myself a friend of Mike Norton's, I know he's a guy you don't piss off. And the Mormon Church found that out, and several other people found that out. And I'm like, and I have said to Mike, and I'm saying again, Mike, hi, thank you for all you have done. Let's be friendly. Let's not be enemies, because this guy's got a mind that will, respect. You don't want to make an enemy out of him, right? You remember what he did, right, Gene?
Yeah. Oh.
Okay.
So he filmed the temple ceremony, and I actually, when I was TBM, I could never remember all this temple ceremony things you have to remember, the long things. So I actually watched it so that I could
remember,
try to remember more things as like homework. It's like, well, it's not sacred anymore. It's on the internet and anybody can see it.
Right.
So I'll just take advantage of it.
It was, that's interesting you say that, because it was recently Ward Radio went live. I don't know if you saw this. I think it was just a few days ago. And Cardin Ellis said that he was talking to somebody. This is a Mormon guy. And he's like, I'm surprised how many of you young people who are just going to the temple for the first time don't know the covenants that are made in the temple. And they're like, you don't learn about those anywhere outside of the temple. And he's like, even my dad told me you can go online and watch them if you want. I still think it's remarkable to me, because I grew up, I left the church 25 years ago, technically before I was officially excommunicated. So you're just a baby Exmo compared to me, Jane. You and
That's right. And Mike Norton also was helpful in trying to get a story out about the elder bishop who was running the MTC, maybe fooling around with some of the sister missionaries.
Right.
And then the one girl who was outing everything started to fabricate some things. And
right.
He got mad at her, and he really tried to push her reputation down.
Right.
Once he realized she wasn't being totally honest, that she was fabricating some things, he didn't want to have anything to do it. So he does have principles.
Right. I mean, it was an awkward situation. We won't say his name again because, like I said, the third time you conjure him, he might actually show up. But it turned out that this woman, she became pretty big in the ex-Mormon movement, and everybody's like, we want justice for her. And it's like, oh my gosh, this woman's coming out with all the tea, blah, blah, blah. She confronted the man himself. And it turns out the woman is a pathological liar and has a long history of doing this. She has mental illness, and she was, we were blown away how quickly we as Exmos got caught up in a conspiracy theory. We want to believe that the church is guilty of these things sometimes. And if we let critical thinking slip away, our imagination starts running away with itself. It's just like the whole To Catch a Predator thing. There's that subtle that circuit in your brain that goes, I bet you they do. I bet you that is what happened. And it's like, okay, there's the evidence. It's the same thing with the Epstein files. There's the evidence. There's the claims that are being made. And then there are all these actors in there. You got to remember, Jeffrey Epstein used to lie all the freaking time, and his version of truth changed depending on who he was talking to and what he could get what information he could extract out of them. He was always playing these power games, and he would bald-faced lie to you. He'd lie straight to your face. He didn't care how powerful you were. If he
As all good charismatic cult leaders do.
Exactly. And so this
I
is
mean,
where
good in quotes.
So Jesse was basically told by the brethren he wouldn't give me the exact name, or if he did, he swore me to secrecy. I do remember a name, but I don't remember at what point he said this was never the name. Either that or I imagined this, so I'm just not going to say who the name is. That somebody high up in the church hierarchy told him, we have got to find out who New Name Noah is. Oh shit, I did it. I said it the third time. We got to find out who he is. And he's like, oh, that's easy. I'll find that out. And they're like, and we got to get in on the inside scoop of how the anti-Mormons, the ex-Mormons are using him. The antis are using him. And who's funding it, who's working it, who's making all these angles, who's working all these angles so that he's managing to sneak into our temples and record our sacred ceremonies, put them up on YouTube. Back in those days, when they went to YouTube and said, that's our copyrighted material, YouTube's like, where is it published as being copyrighted? And it's right. Like, it's
eternal.
It's right. Well, it's sacred. And it's like, okay, well, sacred isn't copyright.
It's registered in the book of life. Don't you know that?
It's registered in the book of the Lamb of God. Do you have a copy of the book of the Lamb of God? No, I didn't think so. But YouTube was like, well, if you don't have a copyright published somewhere and you don't have the content published anywhere, then you can't claim that he's violating copyright. And apparently, at some point, if I remember correctly, conversations I had with, he told me, they came to me and said, they popped up a notification and said, how did this come about? How did you acquire this recording? And I told them bluntly, I was there and I just recorded it. It wasn't stolen. It was done in a state that had one party recording, and which means that you need only one person. You only need permission from one person in the room to record what's happening in there. And the one person in the room was me. I gave myself permission to record, and YouTube would just let him publish it. And it's like, you can't tell him to take it down. He personally witnessed it, so he gets
because of his work. The church changed the temple recommend styles a couple of times.
And
he was getting requests from family and friends who weren't worthy to watch their children's wedding, but he could get them a card, and then they could go and attend the wedding. So he was doing a good work.
For a while there, years, frankly, we all sang the praises of this man before he started to anger the wrong people. And even then, I said, let them get angry. You're an agitator, dude. It's not like you got into this that you couldn't be an agitator. There was a meeting with me and this gentleman and some beers, at a hotel in Salt Lake City at one point, I will say. And we were talking about how he did it, how he filmed the temple videos, and it was stupid simple. Well, even I, who had been a video professional for 20 years, went, "Are you kidding me? That's it?" And he's like, "That's it." Now I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" I was blown away at how simple it was. But at the end of the day, the crafty way in which he did it, he went to the church in Arizona under his actual legal name, went to them, And after he had left the church or left activity, repented and got a temple recommend and went to the temple. it, it was the most non-controversial scheme to get the temple videos that there were. I guess it's been long enough that we could say, and he doesn't even do this content anymore. So I'll just tell you. He's like, you ever been to a spy store? I'm like, oh, I've seen them. I'm like, yeah, only weirdos go in there. He's like, well, I like them. He's like, you go in there and you can find there are pens that you can buy that have a camera on them that when you click it, it's like that. And he's like, you take that and put it on your shirt pocket on your white shirt where you're decked out in your white temple clothes, and you just put it on that and just look to everybody like you own the place and you know exactly why you have a pen on in your pocket. Nobody stops you. And he's like, you just click.
Plus, while you're in the temple, you might receive revelation. You want to write it down.
Exactly. I mean, what if Mahonrai Moriankuma shows up?
You're not going to record it for your posterity.
That's right.
Just like we're doing right now.
That's right. Me and Mo hanging out with Jesus in the temple, and Krista Melka. Oh, don't say it again. Don't say the name again. But yeah, so that's an interesting story. But anyway, so Jesse State, the long story short of that is, and I've already rambled about this. He worked for the Mormon church, made a little bit of money. They didn't pay. He's like, I'm like, but boy, I bet that was a sweet ride. He's like, oh, the church? He's like, no. He's like, they paid me, but it wasn't that much. I was like, do you know? I'm like, you know how much money they have? He's like, nobody knew how much money they had back then. And we
could put a call out right now. What's missing is the current temple ceremony. So if anybody out there can get the current temple ceremony recorded, send it to Joe or me, and we'll try to run it.
I would encourage all of you to do only that which is within the bounds of the law. Be responsible citizens, but also don't be afraid of blasphemy. There is no God. You'll be fine. And so,
that's right.
And so he was working for the church. He was getting all these projects wrapped up, and then he found out who this individual was. And it turns out, once they actually knew, then it was, the only thing they had left to do was to tell temple security, church security, if this guy shows up on property, arrest him or call the police and have him arrested for trespassing. And so, which they eventually ultimately did. And, he went to jail, and then he got back out again, and he was fine, and he's fine. Everything's fine. And, but then Jesse, before he could lose a job, before he got out of that job with the church, he's working with other clients and stuff. And he wrote a book back in the day. It was like Social Media for Dummies, I want to say. One of the for dummies. He's written like 3 or 4, I think, of these books.
For dummies, for sure.
Yeah. And so he goes, he's going to move on to new clients. And he gets contact through, can I say this? Yeah. President Ballard, as I remember, President M. Russell Ballard told him, I don't know if you know Tim Ballard and Operation Underground Railroad, which if you guys know and have followed the Tim Ballard secret whiteboard meeting, M. Russell Ballard, president, then he was a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, eventually would become president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and very nearly the next prophet of the Mormon Church. He was business partners with Tim Ballard in this big Tim Ballard secret whiteboard meeting, and holding regular meetings. According to Tim Ballard, he was having regular meetings, quarterly meetings at least, if not monthly and weekly meetings in some cases, with President Ballard. And also, I don't know if you've seen this, there's a Reddit post, so take it for what it's worth, of somebody who had posted recently that they are a member of the church who was a little disgusted to discover that someone close to them, a wealthy member of the church, was alarmed to get a phone call from a woman they didn't know, from a number they didn't know, and a woman asked them, I'm President Ballard's assistant. is there any chance you have a minute to talk? And yeah, I mean, an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ is calling your phone. Yeah, I'll talk. And President Ballard got on the phone and said, I want to thank you for your service all these years. I want to thank you for your generosity with the church and with all of our charities and the More Good Foundation or whatever. I'm elaborating some of this, I'm sure. I'm just remembering it as I've read it. And then then hit them up for money, saying, we're in very desperate need of a big donation for Tim Ballard and Operation Underground Railroad. And I'm wondering if I could ask you to donate to them. And he wasn't calling to get a donation for the church or for the church's charities or for any of that. He was calling to get a donation for Tim Ballard and Operation Underground Railroad, according to a Reddit post. Who knows how true that is? But apparently, I mean, according to Tim Ballard and according to multiple people that I've talked to around this case, this was just normal. It's like President Ballard would just call people, get money, and then get people to come out and work with to come out and work with him. Well, it so happens that working there at Operation Underground Railroad for free, because he assumed, Jesse assumed they didn't have any money, because President Ballard told them, look, they could really use somebody with your skills so that they could do fundraising. He's presuming they don't have any money. He's like, now, he told me in this interview, he's like, now that I look back, boy, do I wish I'd come in there with a contract saying this is how much my services cost, because I needed the money. And he's losing his church job. And so he went to work for OUR, and while he's there, he strikes up a friendship with Ed Smart, the father of Elizabeth Smart, and he meets Elizabeth, totally blown away. He told me, I'm sure he won't mind my saying this, he's like, as amazing as you think Elizabeth Smart is, she's more impressive in person. Like when the lights are off, when the crowds fade away, like you meet this woman and it's like, and it's like, you can tell her sincerity. She's a genuine good person. And you think, boy, what a tragic thing. A more tragic thing couldn't have happened to a nicer and better person. And he's like, but Ed, he's like, that was in the days when Ed Smart, Elizabeth Smart's father, this is now public, so we can talk about it, was only coming out of the closet to personal friends, wasn't even coming out to his children or to his wife. And Jesse was one of the people he came out to and told them that he was gay, that he knew that he was gay. And frankly, that he was questioning at some point during this Operation Underground Railroad experience, that he was starting to question the church. And it was while this Finding Gardy happened, the sting down in Dominican Republic, Haiti and Dominican Republic share an island, what used to be called Hispaniola. One part is Haiti and it's a mess. One part is Dominican Republic and it's more of a mess. And they went down there with this blessing of President Ballard. Again, M. Russell Ballard, no relation, apparently, to Tim Ballard, just happened to be, and who are at that point business partners in separate ventures in this big network of companies they've made. And they get down there and they're looking for Gardy Marty with Janet Russin, who is running an organization that's connecting that Gardy's father's, Bishop Gesno Marty's orphanage, Foyer de Sion, with adoption agencies in the United States. My understanding, and though I have been told otherwise on this, is that at least one of those entities is LDS Family Services. My understanding is all the time that if LDS Family Services isn't actually adoption, they are making the connections between these Haitian orphans, especially after the earthquake down there, the tragic earthquake they had, when all these children were disconnected from their families, were separated from their families, that LDS Family Services and Christian, particularly Christian networks, adoption networks, were connecting Christian families, including a lot of Mormon families. Mormons are Christians, in my opinion. I don't fuck about with that. I mean, call them whatever you want. They're Christians. But they start getting these children adopted into these families in the United States. And there is some reason to believe that, at least from the reporting we got from Lynn Packer on the subject, that at least some of those children's parents are alive. They're in Haiti. And the children just don't know to say, I'm not an orphan. My parents, live in one part of are working out in the field, or they have gone out to work in this place or that place, and they adopt them in, thinking, presumably the system believes that they are orphaned as a result of natural disasters like the earthquakes, or just, their parents have passed. And these children are getting donated, or not donated, they're getting, or what's the word, adopted into families in the United States and all around the world at a pace of about $25,000 changing hands by the time you've greased all the palms to get these children moved to these places. In, by the way, legislation and policy that was crafted between President George W. Bush and President Bill Clinton to start moving these children from Haiti into the United States with a far lower barrier than you would normally get if you were adopting children from inside the United States. And so you all of a sudden, families that have difficulty adopting children in the United States, but have some money to make adoptions happen, now that these Haitian children, if they can get these Haitian children from these orphanages into the United States, if they can pay $25,000, basically all of a sudden all of these doors that were closed, say, for example, just throwing it out there, does everybody in that household pass a criminal background check? Things like that. These barriers that normally would exist suddenly were opened up. Now, I don't know that was specifically, you only hear rumors about it, but suffice it to say, a lot of questions start coming out of this policy that basically is made so that if you have 25 grand, you can get a child from Haiti. And Gesno Marty, Gardy Marty's dad, a bishop in the Mormon church who lived in the United States for a while, when his son Gardy was born here, he is the guy running this orphanage that very promptly falls under some serious scrutiny. There are all kinds of questions. I'm not going to cast any more allegations of what you can look up and find. If you look up Foyer de Sion, Foyer is like foyer, Foyer. De Sion is like Zion, but with an S instead of a Z. It actually means Zion in Spanish. And so Foyer de Sion starts, falling under some scrutiny about the fact that, there's some shady stuff going on. Are these kids actually orphans? Are they being abused? Are they being assaulted in the orphanage? Does Gesno Marty know about it? How much does he know about it? When his son Gardy, who was 3 years old, I want to say, something like that, gets kidnapped in front of their Mormon church house down there in Port-au-Prince, right? Port-au-Prince. And when his son gets kidnapped, is that retaliation? The immediate suspicion is that it was retaliation from former employees of Gesno Marty's, who know that he has money because he's been connecting these children into these adoption rings at 25 grand a pop. At some point, I believe, don't judge me on my remembering this off the top of my head, but Lynn Packer says that it was millions and millions of dollars that had passed through Gesno Marty and his organization's hands, and then through Janet Russin, the psychic, and then also and ultimately Operation Underground Railroad. We think maybe through the actual organization OUR, or through one of its sister companies in the White Board meeting, the Tim Ballard Secret White Board meeting, including an organization that suddenly pops up, gets created, called Children Need Families, CNF, which was given at that time to be a 501c3 It was not registered as a 501c3 that Lynn Packer could find. Eventually, it gets claimed that this 501c3, which, by the way, its base of operations was an address in Provo that turned out to be the home address of Janet Russin, the psychic, who's helping Tim Ballard clairvoyantly through the power of visions of glory. And Tom, some of you who are not Mormons, when you see this, may start to get lost in this if you haven't been following the story closely. But basically, the whole Daybell cult. This is the Lori and Chad Daybell cult, the Mormon cult within the church. They start hooking up these adoptions through this organization called Children Need Families, which at least on one year ends up being listed as a project of Operation Underground Railroad. And then at some point gets the executive director, who was Janet Russin, gets switched from Janet Russin to Catherine Ballard, Tim Ballard's wife. And so every time this story comes up, you got to remember there's all these connections of personal family members and high up mucky mucks in the Mormon church and high end donors within the Mormon church's ecosphere of big money getting passed around for charity, who are being duped and reduped into these organizations. And the name that keeps coming up in the background again and again and again is Tim Ballard, Tim Ballard, Tim Ballard, Tim Ballard. And so in any event, so Jesse goes to work for Tim Ballard. He says to me in this interview we did, this was like 2 years ago, I want to say, he said he was a narcissist asshole, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows he's a narcissistic asshole. And he said, but when you meet him for the first time, he sits you down, he looks you in the eye, and he tells you God's children are not for sale. And he tells you, I was in this place and blah, blah, blah. And he tells you a story about how he rode to the rescue. And he said, and he's good at it. You don't get to doing what Tim Ballard does without being freaking good at it. And he said, he's like, I consider myself a smart guy. And he said, Joe, part of it gave me the creeps, like right off the bat, like you hear about this, you think about this, but you can't imagine that it's actually happening. And he's like, but when he's looking at you intensely like that, he's got that confidence, he's got that charisma. And for a moment,
blue, steely eyes.
Yeah.
Mesmerizing.
Yeah. Frankly, it is. I mean, they call it mind control sometimes, but it's not anything mysterious. It's not some mysterious voodoo. It's that you're afraid to confront somebody who is that sincere. You want to be polite, and you know people tend not to want to look at somebody when they're that sincere. It's why testimony is. That's why we get trained as missionaries to bear testimony, right? Or as members to bear your testimonies, because when that person's looking at you and says, "I know," beyond the shadow of a doubt, boom, 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 boom.
You know, actually, I was thinking about it in the very beginning of the church. Most of the Mormons that Joseph Smith baptized early were cousins, friends, treasure diggers. And he convinced them that he had powers. And so when they went out as missionaries and testified, that was powerful to the new converts. And then they would get sent out. And then it became less and less the treasure digger types, the superstitious types. So they had to change all the things from being enthusiastic church where everybody's
charismatic, like a Pentecostal type church,
talking and speaking in tongues. Apparently, Brigham Young was really good at interpreting tongues.
Yeah,
but they had to backtrack from that because now they're starting to get normal people.
Right,
and that's the beginning of the end of what attracted Steve Pinecker to Mormonism.
He's a good man, Steve Pinecker, and a man I don't care to piss off. I just talked to him today. Actually, we talked on the phone for like an hour. I think I texted you after that. Anyway, so very interesting conversation. There's interesting things afoot. Well, so the end result of that is, and the reason why I brought in this big, long, rambly part up, and it's as it gets closer to 1 a.m., I do the rambly thing. I thought what was amazing is that, Jesse told me, I was at Operation Underground Railroad's headquarters when they printed up the first flyers that said OUR and the Elizabeth Smart Foundation are now Operation Underground Railroad, that they were merging the two organizations into one. They went down there in 2014, I want to say, so around the same time that this is going on, that they're getting things kicked off in this Washington stings. They went down there to the Dominican Republic trying to find Gardy Marty because Janet Russin has visions where she can see him through the veil. Right? Yeah, she can remote view. Oh, there's Gardy there. And if you watch the recordings of the failed TV show, I think Ryan, as I understand, Ryan Fisher was involved in that on the back end. I did talk to one person who was part of the production company that was involved in that, but who told me they, gave me no useful information. But it was interesting how flighty he was about answering any questions I had for it, even off the record. He was like, I'm like, just off the record, just background information for and he's like, yeah, I won't give you anything for that. He's like, you seem like a nice guy. He was really friendly. He's like, you seem like a nice guy. I really care about what you're doing and everything. But honestly, I just want to put Tim Ballard in my rearview mirror and just not think about him. I'm like, well, I get that. Well, Merry Christmas. Hope you have a nice time. This is a couple Christmases ago. But they were going to merge the two companies, the two foundations, into one foundation when that business with Janet Russin down in Dominican Republic happened, and they didn't find Gardy Marty. Now, you watch the TV show about how they didn't find Gardy Marty. If you watch the episodes that nobody wanted to buy from this awful Mormon propaganda TV show that President Ballard wanted to happen, it becomes very clear that Janet Russin doesn't, she's been selling people on these abilities, these clairvoyant abilities that she doesn't actually have. Big surprise. And when they're down there, according to Lynn Packer, all these people suddenly get really dismayed, including Ed Smart. And they're down there to witness a miracle. And when they don't find Gardy Marty, it turns out that I believe Tim Ballard says this didn't actually happen. I believe that's the case. Don't get me wrong. But according to Lynn Packer's reporting, all the people who worked for OUR down there at that point were told aggressively to sign non-disclosure agreements saying that they would never reveal that it was a psychic that they were following, that it was Janet Russin that they were following out there in Dominican Republic when they didn't find Gardy Marty. And of course, in the TV show, they played it like they did find him, but he got away. But they like carried him off by the time they could get to him. It's such BS, such wild BS. And it was around that time, according to Lynn Packer, that Ed and Elizabeth Smart were taken down off of OUR's board of directors, official board of directors, in their publications. And there was some effort to get all the paperwork announcing the merger between the flyers and posters or whatever, the materials announcing the merger between the Elizabeth Smart Foundation and OUR, and destroy them. And because Elizabeth Smart and Ed Smart, from what I understand now from multiple sources that have been able to verify this, that there were, it was after that failure of Operation Find Gardy that they backed out and said, this we won't have anything to do with this. And Ed Smart winds up resigning from OUR. And then from that point on, they had nothing to do with each other.
They got smarter.
The smarts got smarter. They smartened up.
Got smarter.
So that's the story. What do you think? Was it a waste of your time there, Gene?
Not a total waste of my time. Sure. How
generous of you. Thank you so much.
It's fun to hear your brain think and to tell all the stories that's going on. I was glad to add a little bit.
Hey, you helped out a lot, man. You did the heavy lifting. I'm glad you seem to be feeling better just over the course of this conversation, man. So I'm glad of that. Yeah. So it's an interesting story. I have not looked at the chat like hardly once in the last 2 hours. I'm glad you were in there. I'm glad you were in there. I need to get some people who are official moderators. What do you guys think? Do we need moderators for Hellfire Agency? I don't know who Nagaraj is judging me about my Red Bull. Don't judge me about my Red Bull. Judge me that I take my Adderall with the Red Bull. That was good. So yeah, Tim is still with us. Are you guys? Let me ask you this: Do we? And just tell me shut up if I'm not, if this is too much there, Gene. How excited are you for Thrive St. George?
10 out of 10.
Oh, like that's either don't talk about it or 10 out of 10. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm excited too. There's a lot of people. I don't know if any of you out there are, want to talk about that. You're coming out here. I'm in St. George. Those of you who don't know, I'm basing out of here until I make it out.
Washington.
In Washington, that's right. Washington County and Washington proper. It's all St. George though. That's just what we call St. George. It's exciting. I've never been to Thrive. I understand Kobe Reddish is going to be there. That's exciting. That's new. Of course, in addition to the other people who are going to be there, my understanding is that Nathan's going to be there. Nathan Hinckley's going to be there, and
Bishop's interview.
The Bishop's interview. That's right. Bishop.
Even though he doesn't do that very much anymore, he's regenerating his music career,
which is great. He's a very talented country singer, right?
I would regenerate my music career if I ever had one, but
I'm just recently discovering mine, man. You did Suno. You can do this, man. We can do this. You and me, we can make music. I've written 3 bangers this month so far. Let's see. I had the song I wrote about my ex, which I thought was good. Made her cry. And then I did one today about Tim Ballard, but it's not quite done. Yeah, I mean, I've just been banging out new songs on new songs.
The backgrounds of a couple of my last thumbnails have been generated by AI. I got the prompt right the first time.
It's easy for me to slam AI and say AI, it's a tool of the billionaires and the corporations and da 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 da. I mean every word of it when I say it. That being said, when I use it for me and for us, I do love it.
And plus, like little people like us, we're not having anybody lose their jobs. We would never hire anybody to write a song for us anyway.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, honestly, like I know you've seen this and heard this because, of course, a mutual friend of ours is Megan Connor, who couldn't make it to the show today. Those of you who were curious about the special guest that I teased and who it is, the answer is it was a few people. One is that I did tell Dean that we were going live. If you wanted to join us, you were welcome to. Right?
Yeah.
Either that, or he. I had meant to, anyways. And then, but the one that I had reached out to was Megan Connor, and asked her if she wanted to join us. But it is, we start at 11:15 her time. She's like, I'm going to be in bed by then. And then the other one is that I did get a hold of Cara Burrell, also known as Nuance Ho, but she has her, she has family, and she's like, in the end, I tried. She's like, I tried, but I don't think I'm going to make it tonight. I'm like, that's cool, no problem. So it was last minute, but I did want to show you this because
we enjoy her work about Timmy.
That's right. Timmy Did What podcast. I mentioned that at the head of the show. You guys go check out the Timmy Did What podcast on Nuance Ho, or on Cara Burrell now is her channel's name, right? And great. I was blown away again. And she reached out to me with a special thanks. She's like, thank you for saying such nice things on TikTok about the show. It was a great show. They did a great episode. Ryan Fisher, I don't know very well. He's welcome on the show anytime. But anyways, we just got these, Gene. Speaking of.
You should do your own self full screen right now.
Okay. It's a good thought. Good thought, Gene. Oops. Okay. Bring Gene back in a moment. So this is the space after. These are the signs that are going on the. Do I have it in here? On the big
Yep.
sandwich boards outside of the hotel here in St. George. It's not the hotel where Thrive is being held. It's the. It's going to be at the Hilton Garden Inn that is next door, and we're not holding the event at the same time as Thrive, but it's right afterwards.
Right after.
And our special guest you're going to see in the as you saw is Megan Connor. Megan Connor of Third Verse is
Headlining.
That's right. And she's going to give us a special musical performance in addition to being one of Mormon true crime. Oh, I shouldn't say that way, but anyways, Mormon true crime ecosphere. Megan Connor is also a trained opera singer, and she has a special presentation she's been practicing for us. She actually generously volunteered. I'm going to say this, Megan. When you see this, you're going to be like, Joe. She volunteered when the Church of Korihor was young and new, and she was really impressed with one of my godless sermons. She volunteered to sing a song for us, and I was like, yeah, do this one. And I sent her a song, and she's like, oh, okay. And then we just kind of lost track of time. No judgment. She offered to do something for the church when it was new, and I didn't have any money to offer. But this time around, I said, look, let me feature you at the first ever in-person event on the 22nd of February here in St. George at the Church of Korihor. For the Church of Korihor, and we're going to have a special auction, which auction, the silent auction, is going to be to raise funds for an organization called Cherish Families, which is a organization that helps women, especially women who are victims of domestic violence, down in Colorado City, Arizona /Hilldale, Utah. You don't know. Those are two cities that are the one city, but on either side of the Arizona border, just about 45 minutes from here.
Depending on what state's troops are heading there.
That's right, because it is the
fundamentalist.
That's right, because it's Warren Jeffs' polygamous cult. And when Warren Jeffs went to prison and the FLDS leadership scattered, basically, and dissolved their all their assets, their community assets, their church kind of collapsed and dissolved. There were a lot of women with small children, or women of various ages with children, whole families, basically just abandoned. This is the really dark side of perhaps one of the biggest human trafficking systems in history, which is Mormon polygamy. And as soon as the men go to prison, same thing happened in the LDS Church. Don't let them tell you. Look at George Q. Cannon. You just look at the story of this man, right? That man alone. They come in, they bust the leaders for bigamy or polygamy, the men, and the rest of the men scatter. And then you have all of these families, these women and small children, many of them long-standing victims of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. And they're just left to fend for themselves. And down in, I happened to do a show a couple of weeks ago where people from the Church of Korihor's audience have brought up to me, the people down there in Colorado City, I didn't know this, there are a lot of people down there who feel like they are suffering spiritually in the vacuum left by the FLDS. And I said, really? Just go to the church. Even I would be like, just go to the LDS church. They got everything they need, everything they're used to. And then just give up on polygamy. And from what I understood from a lot of them, they're like, the problem is that a lot of them have deconstructed God. And I'm like, oh, it's just like leaving the LDS church. Most of our people become atheists or agnostics too. And it's like,
that's right. Because when the only true church isn't true anymore, there's no fallback plan.
And I'm like, well, wait a minute. That would make sense then why all of a sudden it's hard for them to get resources down there is because the church. yeah, the church isn't going to come in and rescue them if they don't believe in God, and if they're not, there's no chance of converting them to Mormonism, to the true Mormonism,
because they won't pay tithing.
They don't have money and stuff. So this organization we found out about, we'd actually contacted through, because of Eugene, I got a hold of Brielle Decker, who
Dream Center
helped to found the Dream Center down there, which is the Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's one half of that community, one half of that block. We went down there and filmed outside of there. And I was we were filming for another thing, but while we were there, we took down some blankets that were made for kids, and we don't run into a lot of kids. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever run into a child out on the streets while I'm passing out blankets. So somebody had donated a whole bunch of these blankets to go to kids who are unsheltered. And I'm like, maybe we can find some car parks, because I know a lot of people who have kids who are unsheltered. A lot of times they're living out of their car. And I thought maybe we'll find some of these car parks and see if they have kids out there. And that's when somebody had said, you should go down to Colorado City and take them to the Dream Center. So I did that, contacted Brielle Decker, and had a great phone conversation with her. And she's like, don't bring them to us, take them to Cherished Families. We're good. And so we went over to Cherished Families, and they were beyond grateful. They were like, oh my gosh, we need these so badly. And it just so happens one of our luminaries, Nikki, who also is my flesh and blood sister, dear woman, had a whole bunch of hygiene kits with feminine hygiene products and so forth that are very badly needed out on the streets, that were surplus from another project. And she's like, I've been trying to find an organization that needs these. And we contacted Cherished Families, and again, they said, we'll take them. We need them. And so we went out there, and we happened to drop them and say, we're having a famous, I don't know, somewhat famous true crime podcaster, who is also an opera singer, come out and give us a special presentation, a special event at our auction, where my paintings and a whole bunch of artwork from several artists who have donated. We've been getting artwork ranging from paintings, pottery, drawings. We have sculptures. We have things that are going to be going live in our auction, in our silent auction, and to help generate some support. We're having this event where Megan Connor's going to sing for us. And we said we sure would like to be able to represent ourselves. First of all, we'd love to take the proceeds from all this artwork that sells and give it to you, and to support your work. This organization, among the many things that they do, Gene, they teach these women who have never had, most of them, they've never had a checking account. That's how the polygamists do. You're not allowed to have a checking account. If you get a job, that job, you either work for the church or in the community, so and the money.
The grid.
That's right. I mean, and so these women and their families, they have no credit, they have no checking account, they have no job skills that are
lucky to have a 6th or 8th grade education.
Exactly, especially, and even worse for the boys. It's one of the dirty secrets of the FLDS, particularly, is that they purposely keep the boys who are not high-born in the family systems, the ones who are going to become the next apostles and prophets. They keep them uneducated specifically so that they can compel them to manual labor, so that they can force them into forced labor. And it's just disgusting. It's just shocking how this system of abuse reigned over this community for so long. And we said, look, there are people here doing the good work. Why would we create a mission down there to serve these people when they are serving themselves? These are the women, especially running this organization. They're from that city. They're from that community, and they are out there pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. They're, as they say,
empowerment.
They're empowering their own community, and it's great. It's just great. So anyway, I've kept you long enough here, Gene. It's close to midnight there out where you are, but I'm excited to see you on the 22nd. Everybody, by the way, is welcome. We at the Church of Core Horrors website and at the at our Facebook page. We are within this weekend, we're going to have an RSVP link where people can respond that they want to attend the event. The event is free to attend, and of course you can also donate if you have the means so that we can do future events. So I'm excited.
I'm excited too.
Okay. Well, let's finish up with a hymn. What do you think? Jane, do you have a recommendation?
A him or hers? I don't really care.
A him or hers? Well, in that case, then we definitely need to have video file. Better than Tim Ballard, which is a let's do.
And one thing real quick
Yep.
is for some of the viewers that will see this that haven't seen, earlier about a week ago, I released a video with a former polygamist, and we talk about there were 4 hidden revelations that guided the fundamentalist religion groups, and the church denied that they existed.
Right.
But this last summer, the church put one of them up on their historical resources, archives, quietly.
Was it John Taylor revelation, wasn't it?
The John Taylor revelation, right? But there's 3 other revelations that count as well as sort of foundational to the fundamentalist and all the other polygamist groups, that Ballards and all the others. So
I haven't watched it yet. I'm excited. Now that you're mentioning it, I did
remember. Alred Jessup.
Oh wow, that's a polygamous name, and good for him.
It's Moroni something Jessup.
I
can't remember, but whatever.
All right, friends. Thanks so much for coming out here. Again, remember that if you feel so inclined and you want to help the work, please go to korahor.org, click on the give button. Also, korahor.org/give. And let's say, I'm thinking the age of reason. Till next time, my friends, remember on Sunday, 10 a.m., we got another godless sermon, got a banger. I've been
share, like, and subscribe.
That's right. If you don't subscribe, the Christians win.
After the night of faith dawns our revolution. Rebels in an age of doubt took hold of our evolution. Harness the elements, tame the gods of thunder, cast off the slave's chains, look up with wonder. Born into the age of reason, with hearts that grow and heal, we can build our tomorrow with minds that know and feel. Rise against tyrants, rise from bended knee. Adorn the age of reason, we choose to be free. to be free.